At least 172 mothers have been killed by their sons over the past 15 years, and children have witnessed the murder of their mothers in more than 120 of those cases, according to a new report by the Femicide Census. The report, based on a comprehensive database tracking women killed by men in the UK, has documented over 2,000 femicide cases since 2009. The findings reveal a disturbing pattern of fatal violence against women, prompting calls for the government to implement a dedicated strategy to address the crisis. The analysis shows that mental health issues were a factor in the majority of matricide cases, with 58%, 102, of killings linked to mental illness. The report criticizes mental health services for failing to conduct adequate risk assessments in cases involving male violence. "Nobody's been asking about what's going on," said a representative from the organization. "Why hasn't there been an emergency call for risk assessments for men who are abusive to female relatives?" This is happening all the time year after year. The trend remains constant. In 113 of the matricide cases, victims were overkilled, subjected to excessive, brutal violence beyond what was needed to cause death. In one such case, 76-year-old Bhojan Kaur was murdered by her son, Sandeep Singh, who had a history of controlling and coercive behavior following the death of his father. This is just the tip of the iceberg, the report warns. Think about all the older women living with abusive sons. They may not be killed, but many will spend the final years of their lives in misery. Broader femicide patterns report paints a grim picture of male violence against women in the UK. One woman has been killed every 3 days since 2009, and 90% of victims were killed by a family member, partner, or someone they knew. Current or former partners were responsible for 61% of the killings. Key findings include 1,458 of the victims were aged between 20 and 60, while 5% were teenagers and 22% were aged 60 or older. Overkill was documented in 59%, 1,183, of all femicide cases. Weapons used included knives or sharp instruments 49%, strangulation or asphyxiation 27%, blunt instruments 17%, and physical force 16%. Most killings occurred in the victim's home 71%, often shared with the perpetrator 40%. In addition to matricides, 37 women were killed alongside 53 children. In 77% of these cases, the children's father was the perpetrator. Justice and sentencing gaps. Families of victims are calling for tougher sentencing in domestic homicide cases. The report notes that while 60% of offenders were convicted of murder, 22% were found guilty of manslaughter due to diminished responsibility or culpable homicide, and 12% died by suicide before conviction. Sentences varied widely. The shortest prison term served for murder was just 9 years, while the longest reached 47. Only 20 men, around 1% of convicted murderers, received a whole life order. Manslaughter is a controversial crime. The authors argue, of 2 to 9 men convicted of manslaughter before 2020, only 18 remain in custody. CT of manslaughter before 2020, only 18 remain in custody. Some avoided prison entirely. In one case, a man who slit his wife's throat from behind was acquitted after claiming self-defense, despite a pathologist's testimony suggesting murder. The data also shows disparity in treatment. While 76% of sons convicted of manslaughter due to diminished responsibility were placed in mental health facilities, only 42% of partners or ex-partners received similar treatment.